Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's presentation. We're going to be spending our time together utilizing data to help inform decisions related to the evaluation of core, Tier 1, and then also Tier 2, Tier 3 specific programs, particular interventions, etc. We are the PVAAS team, the Pennsylvania statewide PVAAS team for PDE. My name is Laurie Kolka, and while I work currently on the PVAAS statewide team, my employer is Lancaster Lebanon, IU 13, and we work under a contract with PDE to support educators across the state in utilizing data to make decisions at the programmatic level to help inform student placements, to help inform program improvement. And today we're going to talk about how data can be utilized to help support MTSS and making decisions around MTSS. Prior to joining the PVAAS team, I was a director of curriculum and educational programs, and that I had oversight of an MTSS framework, federal programs, all of the supports and services that go into that. So I welcome you today, and this is a fantastic place to join with your colleagues and to share learning and experience. So today, just to let you know what's coming up, we'll have information related to data available within PVAAS, and then we'll also invite you to go into PVAAS as well. So PVAAS is a website accessible via your laptops, your phones, your iPads, whatever you have. So if it's tucked away in a bag, at some point today we'll ask you to pull it out, and then you can participate in the data exploration with us. And at this point, I'd like to welcome and introduce my two colleagues.
All right. Can everybody hear me there? Is that good? Okay. So I'm Jen Ross. I am Laurie's counterpart on the statewide team, the PVAAS statewide team. While Laurie sits in the eastern part of the state and our IU's in the center, I'm in the western part of the state. But I've been with the PVAAS team since 2007, the year after we went statewide. So it made me realize we've had this data we're talking about today for 17 years already. But we didn't have all of the data we're going to talk about 17 years ago. We've been adding to it with your feedback of, I need this to do my work. And so what you'll walk away with is seeing how can you then use some of this new data and some of the older data we've had for a very long time to do this work about really looking at your system and how healthy it is. So thanks.
And good morning. Yes, it's still the morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Laura Miller. I do not work on the PVAAS team, but I'm a big fan and user of PVAAS. So I work for the Allegheny Intermediate Unit 3 as a training and consultation coordinator. I work on the multi-tiered system of support and have done so at 2 different IUs over the last 8 years, I guess, at this point. And so I work with school districts, small, medium, and large, to use their PVAAS data, amongst other data sources, to evaluate the strength of their multi-tiered system of support framework, as well as to look at the targeted supports for tiers 2 and 3. So I'm excited to be here with you today.
So that's a little about us. We'd love to hear about you. Raise your hand if you are a district leader in the room, LEA or district role. Fantastic. What if you're a school principal? A school leader. Thank you. What about a teacher leader? What about a teacher, period? Excellent. Thank you. How about instructional coaches? Interventionists? There we go. Data specialists. How about fellow IU employees? That's a big group as well. Who did I miss? Patton. How could I have forgotten that? Thank you. Thank you. And who did I miss? Shout out a role that I missed. School psychologists, welcome. Welcome to today's presentation. That helps us really to tailor some of our examples in today's presentation to you and work that you're doing. Now, we're at an MTSS conference, so we want to make sure that we give some voice to MTSS. In Pennsylvania, we have identified 2 different models for MTSS, elementary, secondary, but I said 2 different. There's a lot that's the same. So let's first focus on what's the same. The structure around that center triangle, analyze, implement evidence-based practices, evaluate, and define. That's the same whether you're at the elementary level with MTSS or you're at the secondary level for MTSS. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, is how we can utilize data to help support that cycle. Now, in the center, you'll notice that triangle. A key difference in Pennsylvania is that the elementary has the 3-tier model. You specifically see 3 tiers, bottom, middle, and then the top. But then at the secondary model, that tier 1, tier 2, that kind of meshes. And then we have a specific tier 3 in the secondary model. We recognize that a lot of the interventions, the instruction, that can take place at the core level by the classroom teacher with, specially designed supports, interventions, all those pieces. So wherever you administer your programs or share that core tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, we're going to be talking about utilizing data to help inform those decisions. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to be talking about your MTSS discussions can talk about things like, is our core programming working? So we have data within PVAAS to help answer that question. Is our system effective at growing students? Is our core tier 1 effective at moving students forward? Are there specific programs or services we have in place at tiers 2 and tier 3, are they effective, or are they as effective at moving our students as what we would hope they would be? So we're specifically going to be looking at PVAAS growth data today in all sorts of different ways. But we're going to be looking for patterns in and amongst groups of students. We're going to be seeing, are there differences? Are there differences for students at different achievement levels? Do our high achievers grow differently than our lower achievers? Or what about our English language learners or federal programs Title I? So we're going to be able to differentiate between student groups to really unearth some of those growth trends. So are we seeing, and this is the big question at the bottom, are we seeing the appropriate growth for our students as we would expect? So today we're going to be talking about PVAAS and specifically the data points at the system level and program evaluation. So did anyone join us for our morning session on student level reporting? Great, welcome back. Good to see you. Good to see you again. So at 8 a.m. we talked everything student level. So that would inform your student level discussions, your student study meetings. But right now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about your system. Overall, what is the health of your system? What's the health of your core? And then we're going to help you to evaluate your programs in tier 2 and tier 3. So while this morning we focused specifically on the student level, this later morning, we're going to focus on the system at the core, tier 1, tier 2, and also tier 3. So specifically, what are we talking about? When I say PVAAS, who has some level of experience in PVAAS? This is excellent. This is a whole classroom of, I should say ballroom. This is a whole ballroom of users. So it's great to see you. So then for those of you familiar, the reports we're talking about, when we're talking about system level, are the value added, the growth of student groups, and the diagnostics. Those 3 reports in combination can give you some data to reflect on the health of your overall system. And then when we talk specifically about program evaluation, we're talking about the diagnostic data. So those are the reports that we'll be highlighting in today's session. Now, for those of you who were not able to join us for the morning session on student reporting, there's a whole other suite of data available at the student level. And that can be used to inform your student study meetings, your conferences with students, your conferences with families. It's all available under what would be called the student report in PVAAS. So if at any point you want to explore that, we have some resources to help with that as well. All right, I'll give you a second to read the quote on the board. So So why begin with the system? I know that we all teach our students by name, right? So we want to look at our individual student data and we want to make progress with our individual students, and that's really important. It's also important to take a look at the system as a whole. If you just focus on the students that require interventions, you might be missing an opportunity for whole system growth that could not just help those students in intervention, but they could help all students. So when we're talking about beginning with the system, that is begin with the system, certainly, and as you're talking about student level data, just don't forget the bigger system and the data that's available to help evaluate whether that is working for the whole group. Because right here, Anita Archer says that you can't intervene your way out of poor core. So this is what this image is. When we're talking about the system, we're really talking about core instruction, what everybody receives. So what everybody receives would be tier 1. So those are all of your learners. So if we're looking at the health of the core, we're looking at how well all of your learners are responding to the curriculum, instruction, assessments, how you're organized for learning, how that all goes into play. Because then some of your students receive tier 2 programming and supports as well. And then a few other students, they also receive tier 3 programming and supports. So your system works on all of those pieces together, but your core, your tier 1, is what everybody receives. So you want to make sure that's healthy. You want to make sure that that is moving all of the students, or at least a good majority of the students, in the right direction. So that's what we're talking about, determining if it's working. The MTSS framework, is that working? If you have data to suggest that the core is not meeting the needs of your students, or at least the majority of your students, then you want to turn the conversation to curriculum, instruction, assessment, or organization. You want to figure out what it is in that area that we could tweak for the core or for tier to help support all learners in their progress. So in other words, we want to reflect on our own practices, review what's working, and then make adjustments if needed. So to call it back to the MTSS model that was on the first couple of slides, we're looking to analyze, implement, evaluate, define. So we're using data throughout that improvement cycle, specifically right now and today, talking about core instruction to start. When I talk about my core, I'm talking about these 4 components, and I've been rattling them off, but in case I want to slow down for a second, curriculum. There's a lot of elements that build out a curriculum, like your written document, like its alignment to standards. Those are all pieces of the curriculum system that need to be in check here. Instruction would be maybe those strategies that you use in the classroom to access the curriculum, to access the standards. How does that all play together in the instructional space? Assessment is your assessment plan. We're talking today about PVAAS, and that runs automatically off of state assessments, PSSAs, Keystones, Access for Ls, those types of assessments. But likely you have a local assessment plan in place. Who in the room uses an assessment outside of PSSAs? I'm talking Acadians, STAR, MAP, right? Those are so important. That local assessment system is what helps to track your progress throughout the year. So you can see, is your instruction, is your curriculum having the intended effect? And you don't have to wait until PSSA time to know if your students are progressing on the right track. You have these indicators throughout the year. So that's part of your assessment plan. And then when I talk about your core or your whole framework, I'm also talking about how you're organized for learning. There's a lot that goes into organization. It could be the number of minutes you spend in instruction, the number of minutes you spend in intervention. It could be how students are grouped for learning. It could be the structure that takes place in the classroom itself. So there's all sorts of moving parts in a system, in a core tier 1 system. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide data to help evaluate whether that system is working the way we expect it to, and then dig a little bit deeper to say, like, if it's not saying exactly what we want, what are some areas that we would be able to tweak? So system, have I convinced you? We're going to talk about the system today. So system level focus first. So how effective is our MTSS framework? So we're asking questions like, what's the pattern of growth for the all student group? How's my all student group growing? What's the pattern of growth for different student groups? Maybe by gender, maybe by IEP, maybe by L's. So like you pick it. So do our student groups have different growth measures? That might help us to problem solve in working to improve our system. And then does growth differ for various types of learners? When we say that phrase, we're really talking about the students who are generally higher achievers and have that history, or the middle achievers or the lower achievers. We have data to suggest growth patterns for each of those groups as well. And again, we're going to be focusing on PVAAS. And I guess I have to say that I love PVAAS, Jen loves PVAAS, Laura's a big PVAAS fan, but it's not your only source of data. So you need to be utilizing multiple sources of data to help evaluate how effective is your system. So specifically, I am going to jump into a demo site a little bit later today, but if you do have your device out and you want to log into PVAAS, you'll hit a reports menu once you log in. And the PVAAS reports menu has all sorts of reports available. And this one I just wanted to highlight. It is not what we're talking about today. So after today's session, if you want to see more about that student level data, you would find it right there under student reports. So we're going to spend all of our time today not in that, but right there it is in case you want to follow up with any new learning. Instead, what we're going to focus on is value added, growth of student groups, and diagnostic. Now, I will say for the principals in the room, you have school level reports, for sure. You'd be able to see school level reports. For teacher leaders in the room, you probably have access to school level reports for your school. What you might also find, depending on your role, district leaders, you might also see district level data. So when we're talking about evaluating your core, you're thinking about it from your job role. So if you're thinking as a principal and a teacher, you're probably looking at your school, your grade level, math, reading. If you're a district administrator, you might be thinking about the system as a whole. What does all 4th grade look like, or what does all 8th grade look like? So depending on your perspective would point to which data set to go to. And there could be cause to go to both data sets depending on your role. So we'll take a look at those a little bit later today. So just as another plug for the use of data, there's multiple measures of data that exist. You have demographics, you have perception data like survey, beliefs, values. You have student learning data, school process data. All of this can inform how effective is your system. Now, today we're going to be talking about student learning data, specifically achievement and growth. Because in PVAAS, you'll be able to see both things. You'll be able to see your achievement data and your growth data. And you're going to want to look at both those things. I have a nice image here. So let's pretend that this is a student data set that you're looking at, and you have one group of students that by the end of the school year is above proficient. Yay, like they're plus side of proficient. That's your percent proficient advanced students. That's great. Then you have another student group that at the end of the year did not make the proficiency line. Rats. So they are not proficient, that student group. That's achievement. That's what we're talking about. At the end of the year, here's what they achieved. The top group was above proficient, bottom group was below proficient. But here's why we need to think about more than achievement. We have to think about growth too, that change over time. Because what if I told you that top group of students started the year even higher achieving? And by the end of the year, they had lost ground. They're still above proficient, but they lost ground. So that might make you feel a little bit differently about that group's progress. What if you knew that the second group, when they started the year, they were pretty far down? Like they were very low achieving, but by the end of the year, they gained ground. No, they're not proficient yet, but they're on the way to proficiency. So it's not enough to just talk about achievement. You also have to talk about growth, and it's really the pairing of data that becomes really important when we're evaluating the effectiveness of our core. Yeah, it is important to consider achievement and growth. You might think that we put together that slide. Okay, so now that's our introduction, why we're here today, why we're talking about data and core instruction. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jen to talk a little bit more about PVAAS. But Jen, there's a whole bunch of users in the room.
Yeah, so we will, and I'll maybe get the clicker for you there. Yeah, so we do have a lot of users in the room. So you probably already know this, so I'll probably go through it quickly, but maybe some of you, it's not. If you were in the morning session too, I know a number of you were, you heard a lot about that looking forward piece that you see up there. PVAAS is a data analysis tool. It's not another assessment, it's nothing like that, but it does take our state assessments, and if there's an option and your district has submitted local assessments, Laurie was talking about that NWA, that STAR, you can submit that data to be analyzed in this way as well. So you have some growth data as well with that. But PVAAS does allow you to see data from two different perspectives. A lot of times the first thing we do here is, oh, PVAAS, growth. Like that's what people tend to think. That's true. A lot of growth data in there that helps you look back. It's like looking through the rear view mirror, the side mirror on your car. We've been there already, but it's good to see where we've been so we can evaluate, is it working? Is our system working? There is the whole other piece though about looking forward and planning for students and individual students or groups of students. Our other session was about that, but what we are going to be talking about today, right, is this piece. So how many of you have kind of been working with this since you are a PVAAS user, have gone to that diagnostic report, that very last one you see there? Have you gone to that? Okay. I'm seeing a lot of nods of heads or whatever, because I have found that's often where we go first. We dig just into the diagnostics. What we're going to suggest is, yes, that's important information, but there's two other reports to go to that give you an even bigger picture about your system first. Okay, so those are the value add and growth of student groups reports. A lot of users in the room, so this is going to be a quick review hopefully, but it may also give you some other language, if you haven't seen this user-friendly language, about the growth colors that we have in PVAAS. So we do have 5 potential colors that you're going to see at a growth report. Dark blue, light blue mean gained. There's a lot of technical language in the legend on the report, but essentially this is what they mean. Dark blue, light blue means gained ground. Those students increase their achievement, they've gained ground. The green, they've maintained, meaning for wherever they started, they maintained that level of achievement. And that's why we often say, well, green is kind of the growth standard. That's what we want. We want students to at least maintain. Yellow and red, they've fallen behind. The only difference between the light blue and the dark blue, or the yellow and the red, you can see the asterisks there, is that we just have more data to say that. A dark blue versus a light blue, we have more data to say that they've gained ground. Okay? How many people think, blue, I'm good. I'm rocking it. I'm feeling really good when I get those blues. Right? Yellow and red, it's an indicator for you. That's an indicator, a flag that we need to pay attention to that, especially if we see that over time, because we're losing ground with students. We often get the question, is green good? We often go back and say, is it good enough? That's really the question you want to ask about green, because green, whether it's good enough to maintain achievement, it really depends on the group of students you're talking about. If you have a low achieving group of students, think about what that means to maintain that achievement. Students are coming in low and we're keeping them low. Better than losing ground, but it's not going to be enough. We really need to see the blues with our lower achieving groups of students. A very different implication than getting greens with really high achieving groups of students. Okay? So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your own data. Here are some of the questions, the main questions. I know we're just going to put them up here real quick, but I know Laurie went over these. Just to remind you that if you're looking at some of this value-added reporting, the reporting I'm just going to go to here in a minute, you're really asking, is the system working for each one of your subjects and grades? Is there any patterns that you're noticing across state assessments? You can do the same thing if you submitted your local assessments. I think it's important to remember, if you see that, you may be seeing your local assessments when you go into your own local data. So this is the newer value-added report. On the left-hand side, you do see an entire filter panel that allows you, with checkboxes, with some drop-downs, to be able to select different grades and subjects. If you're just meeting as a math team, you may just want to select math and just remove the ELA or the science. This is a totally interactive report for you to enter and include just the data that you want. You can include specific growth numbers and achievement numbers with it as well. By default, you see the colors, because the colors are really a first good indicator of your system. So I'm just going to kind of ask you there. This is a middle school. This is a demo middle school. That is our most recent year, 2023. Math is listed first. What we're seeing in math, 6th, 7th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Those were the grade levels last year. Here's ELA. And here's the colors for those grade levels. 8th grade, science. Just look as a whole. Is the system working? This is where you want to start first before going to the student. What would you guys say? And you can just kind of like shout it. I know we're in a really big room, but what would you say? Is the system working for any of the groups, do you think? Math versus ELA, what do you think? ELA looks better. I'm hearing, yep. What about math? Not great. It's not right. I would probably say, just looking here to quick, I might have some things to think about before I even think about some of my tier 2, tier 3 supports. I might think about, what is this as a whole? It's, at least this past year, for all students, tier 1, like this just wasn't quite getting us where we wanted to be, okay? Here's the other thing that we would suggest is really important. You don't want to just have 1 year of data. You want to be able to add prior years to see, is that a trend? Is that a trend over time? So over on that left-hand side of that filter panel, we've just showed you part of it. It's kind of like probably about 2/3 of the way down the screen. You can now add clear back to 2018. We've been purposeful about that because we want you to still be able to see prior to the pandemic, because a lot of times we're still hearing those questions. Well, was it still because of some of the things we're doing and we're trying to support as we come out of the pandemic? There was a lot of work to do with that. So sometimes it's really helpful to turn on clear back then, because if you're seeing the same trends even then, we can remove that, like that kind of thing off the table. So just when you do this, one other thing I want to highlight, when you change those years, here's something we found really helpful. At the very top where I've highlighted that grade and year, you want to click on the grade. Right now, the grade is kind of to the left of the year. I've switched those. You can click on either one of those. I suggest clicking on the grade. It will move it over to the left. That's why that left arrow is there. And that resorts it so it's much easier for you to see. Okay, 6th grade system, last 2 years, what do you think? Yeah, we got 2 years of data to say 6th grade system wasn't really working in math. 7th grade, something different happened, right? A prior year, we were seeing a blue. So this helps you to start seeing, especially when you start to see it multiple years in a row, it's more evidence for you to say, right, we really got to be looking at our whole system, not just individual supports and programs for students. This I just want to show you real quickly. This is where you could get the data for local assessments.
we have a question on that slide as well.
Yep, so just know that, right, this is obviously 4th grade and up, but if you put your local assessment data in here, you're going to see this information about like your K-2 or K-3. Many of you might be an elementary building, a K-5, or maybe you are a K-2, K-3 building. Now you've got the same kind of growth data for those lower grade levels, which can be helpful. So yeah, question.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think asking this question will help me make sense more of what you're saying. The current colors and the rankings of students, is that based on a percentile ranking of all students in Pennsylvania, or is that a set expectation for growth each year?
So what they look at is in PSSA, I'm just going to speak to PSSA, what we have here. PSSA, math, and ELA, we do test students every single year, so we know how they're performing. We can't, though, in Pennsylvania, compare our scale scores from year to year. So that's one important thing to know. It's just, the scales mean something different each year, like those actual numbers. So they convert to what's called an NCE. So if you happen to turn on, let me just go back one, I think, slide. Whoop. Remember over here where I said you could turn on these achievement numbers? If you turn on achievement, you're going to see an entering achievement number and an exiting achievement number. That's in the NCE scale, because what they're doing is they're converting the scale scores of those students, so their actual performance over the years leading up to that grade level, and they're converting it into an NCE scale that's common. To interpret it, the 50 is the average. Most of them are going to fall, it's like a range of 1 to 99. So if you see your achievement come in around 50, that's saying your students are entering around the state average of 50. The expectation, we're going to keep them there. So the expectation in Pennsylvania that we have that growth standard says they're going to maintain wherever they entered. So it is based on where are they coming in, based on their history. We're taking all those scale scores. Where did they enter the grade level? Now did we keep them there? So you have an entering and an exiting achievement number. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
So if we're comparing them to their former selves, essentially, is there somewhere in the interface here where you can look at the state of Pennsylvania as a whole so that you know how your school is comparing to the state expectation? Because I'm just curious.
Well, the state expectation is green. The state expectation, that is really, so no matter group of students. But
sure, but I guess comparing to different districts.
Yeah. There is, this data becomes public a little bit later. Like this data came out for 2023 last week, but we give districts a chance to review that first before it all goes public. The public site becomes available generally in December. And so actually you can see from 2022 data, I think 2021, I'm not sure, but I think, so you can see publicly, all districts, all schools, this data is on the public site. So you'll see a login button, then you'll see public access. So yeah, you could go in there and look within your IU region, within your county, across the state. There's many different reports that you can look at it to compare.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions with that? Because I know there's a lot of data in here, so we had to kind of pick and choose and not show everything because we just weren't going to have time, but okay. All right, so let's just kind of go on here because what we did want to give you, what's the time looking like? Do we have time? We wanted to allow you a chance to get in here and see how that interface worked. So if you have your device, go ahead. We're going to demonstrate this. If you don't have access, or if you do and you just want to use a demo account sometime, that is on here for you, so you can take a screenshot of it, take a picture of it. Feel free to use that. We'll show you very quickly that interface, how it works, and if you want to follow along with your own data, feel free. So what we're logging in with is like a district account. It's like a superintendent's level account. this is the default report that you come to. So you will automatically see the most recent data with those growth colors. Let's go ahead and show that achievement, Laurie, on the left. Since we had that question, I think that's a great place to look. There's where you can start to see how many students were included in every grade level, and you do start to see that entering and exiting achievement. So my group of students here in 4th grade in math entered 24.3. That's saying their history, that's where they were coming in. Remember that scale of 1 to 99, 50 is the average. That's definitely a lower achieving group. They exited, though, at 11.8. Now, I know this is demo data. We usually don't see quite that dramatic. But that's why you can see that's in the red. They left 4th grade lower than where they entered. Versus, look at the group in 5th grade. 26.9 is how they entered. 27.9 is how they left. So you can see the dots a little bit to the right of the dashed line in the green, because it's positive, they moved up, just not quite enough data to say, okay, now we're seeing it into the blue. So the more they increase, the more data that we have, you're going to start to see your dot move out into those colors. Okay? So let's show them how they can put on different years. So on the left-hand side is where you see the years. Laurie's going to add some of those on. And do you see now, okay, we're seeing all of 2018, every grade level, all of 2019. But we see that year in grade there with that arrow. As soon as Laurie clicks on grade, that's what resorted it to allow you to very much easier, I think, see that trend. All right, I just want to look at 4th grade. I just want to look at 6th grade, what's happened over time. Okay? Questions? Yep.
When it's sorted like that, does that mean the 4th grade has to limit years or the current 4th grade?
Great question. So that's 4th grade in those years. So when you look at those 3 rows of 4th grade, it's 3 different 4th grade cohorts. So that's really, it is. It's telling you about what's 4th grade system as we get a different group in every single year. There is the option we do have over here. We didn't really show it, but you have an option of following an exact cohort, like you're saying, over time. What are the students doing as they're moving from 4th grade to 5th grade to 6th grade to 7th grade? Same students. That would be under a cohort option. It answers a different question for you. Still a very good question. It's just a different question depending on what you're looking at. But both would be very relevant to look at in terms of your system. Another question, yep. The sorted, yep. Oh.
I was participating instead of facilitating, so I'm going to go and grab the mic so you can repeat. Can I find the question again? I apologize. There you are.
I was just asking, you just showed it, but I didn't see what you clicked to see how you had the grade level, just 4th, yep, and then it showed 2018, 2019, 2023, and then 5th, 2018, 2019, 2023. Like, how did you organize it like that?
So real quick, you can refresh and start all over. If you go to the very top, you'll see one of our standard little refresh buttons that, you know, is kind of standard now, that little circle. Refresh it. We'll go back to the beginning. So if you ever want to do that, because you're like, well, now I want to totally look at something different. Right, just refresh it. So Laurie is selecting all those years and then is going to go to the top of the actual data, and within the data, click grade. Yeah, another question.
Wait, hang on one second. I'm coming.
In my district, I don't have access to this because I'm a specialist. I teach health and phys ed. But just to understand it, since we're the PBIS coaches, when I'm looking at 4th grade at 2018, to look at them at 2019, do I have to go to 5th grade then?
Correct.
Okay.
So, right, if you wanted to go, okay, I really want to look at those same students as they're moving through my system, it'll already do that for you over with this cohort button. Instead of selecting years, actually I could highlight as you're doing this, right? Over here is where she did that. Instead of selecting the years, Lori selected this cohort, and it's going to say, I'm going to follow these 8th graders that were in 2013. I'm going to follow them through time. And then you can see other cohorts of students. So it does that for you. They were in 4th grade. Whoops. Yep. So this group of students was in 4th grade in 2019, didn't test in 2020, but then they were 6th graders in 21, they were 8th graders in 2023. So you can look at it different ways. Click the years or click the cohort. Any other questions? This is a really important report to start with. That's why it's the first report when you log in. Before you jump to smaller groups of students, individual students, please start here. This is going to tell you a lot more of where you need to dig further. Or do we need to just stop what we saw here in math? Whoa, 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 whoa. We got some other work to do. We got some investigating, but something definitely wasn't working in math. Okay? Other questions? Okay. Because here, and we're not going to really illustrate this, we'll certainly be here. Laurie and I are always available to help. You've got IU points of contact. Laura's from IU3, right? To help with how do you look at these other reports. But we want to make sure, even beyond value added, there are 2 other reports that help you look at growth. You've got a growth of student groups and a diagnostic. These 2 reports help you look at smaller groups of students within those grade levels to basically say, is it really working for all types of learners? What about our demographic groups? What about our high achieving, average achieving, lower achieving students? As we dug into math where it really wasn't working, these would be places we would want to go next. The growth of student groups report, Laurie showed you in the reports menu. If you go to your school report, it starts with value added. Growth of student groups is the very next one listed. What we would suggest you do is you click on the tab. You can view it by subject, but what we suggest is click on the tab at the very top that says view it by the student group. It's then going to tell you what are all the groups you have in your school. So you may not see all of these. You may see a couple. You may see a lot. You need at least 11 students in a group, okay, to get a grade or a student group. These are all demographic student groups. When you click on that and you see those student groups, it brings up a report for you after you would, for example, click on one of those groups. I'm going to click on students with IEPs. It gives me more details. Same growth colors, but it does tell me, students with IEPs, are they growing? Are they maintaining? Are they falling behind? What's our system doing in terms of supporting the growth of students with IEPs? It is going to break it down by grade level for you or overall. So, for example, math. Overall, this is where I see overall. I'm seeing that red. Some grade levels I did see a maintain, but really overall it's saying even with IEPs in math, right, system's not really working. I can also do that for other groups, like economically disadvantaged, English learners. You can do it for your lowest performing third of who you serve. You can do it by race. What were some of the other? I'm trying to think. There's so many. There's like 20-some groups that you can look at, but they're the standard demographic groups. Really important to look into that, because for here I would say, well, for some grade levels, I actually am seeing pretty nice growth for my economically disadvantaged group. It might just be one particular grade level. The other report that's really important, and Laura's really going to dig into this one, But the diagnostic report is really important to help you look at those groups by achievement. So growth of student groups helps you look at it for demographics. This one helps you think about what's the growth pattern for students that have that history of higher achievement, average achievement, or lower achievement. It could be different. So when you go into this report, we've just highlighted the filter panel that you'll see. These filter panels are always on your left-hand side, but we wanted to highlight that you can change the year, you can change the test and subject. So you can pick the grade and subject you want to look at. It will remind you for that ELA grade 7, back on that value-added report, as a whole group, we saw dark blue. But now we need to go see, what does it look like for all of my student groups? Now, I think I have, so let me go back here. What it's going to give you is it's going to give you this report that has a bar chart at the top, but I'm going to highlight this table. This table is grouping students in the state from 1 to 5 versus what's their achievement in the state. Is it in the lowest 20% of the state? Is it in the middle 20% of the state? Is it in the highest 20% of the state? Your student count tells you how many students you have like that. The color tells you about their growth. The colors mean the same thing. Gained, maintained, fell behind. So this, to me, would say, I've got blues in my lowest achieving groups. I'm growing my lowest achieving students, even my average. My higher achieving, they're maintaining. If you see that reversed, you got probably a concern, right? We don't want to maintain lower achieving students. So I just want to kind of quickly illustrate that again to reinforce, because it's going to be really important when Laura comes in here. What we're doing is we're taking the entire state, say ELA 7th grade, we're breaking them down into 5 groups. Who falls into that lowest achievement group versus the highest versus the middle. So here's some language to put around that. Students in group 3 are your average achieving students. 4 and 5, they're above average or really like well above average. Or groups 1 and 2, below average, well below average achieving. If you want to think about putting some user-friendly language about those groups. Just remember, this is how you're going to view and look at different grades and subjects to see, is your system working and working differently for different groups of students? Okay? So I know I want to pay attention to time, make sure that we get into some of these other pieces too. But any questions?
Okay, so I'm going to take the approach outside of the PVAAS, right, and talk to you about the MTSS framework. So if you are looking at how does this kind of all fit together and the big question, what therefore should I do about it, right? That's kind of what we're going to talk about as we look at this diagnostic report. So, new clicker, let's see here. There we go. I want to start by highlighting the fact that the patent team, the patent MTSS team, has already designed a guide to PVAAS quintile review document for you to utilize. So Dr. Jen Collins, our state lead for MTSS, has developed this form, and we're going to take a look at this and then some pieces that we use at RIU kind of that are complementary that go together to help you think strategically about what to do if you find that the majority of your students are falling either to the left, right, in quintiles 1 and 2, or in quintiles 4 and 5. What could we do about that? And so if you utilize this guide, it's going to walk you through, look at one report, write your answers, and give you the instructional implications from it. So what should we do about that? So a great resource to have. It is linked for you there in the slide deck. Dr. Collins' contact information is there as well if you have questions specifically about this resource. But it is an excellent one to get started and help to frame your conversation within your own administrative team to start to consider what is happening. And then, as always, I'm going to put a plug in later as well, but reach out to your patent MTSS team or your IU TAC to help guide these conversations. This is literally what we do all day long, right? We talk about these and help you kind of think through that. So we are all available to help support you in this work. So here's just a quick guide that we use at RIU to help districts think about this. We talk a lot about where the median student in a grade level for a subject falls. And if you think back to what Jen was sharing with you, if your median student falls into quintile 1, it means that most of your students are well below average. And that is something that we see, right, in some districts. If your median student falls into quintile 4, it means that the majority of your students are above or well above benchmark, right? So you just really, or I'm sorry, average, not benchmark, average. So you really want to be thinking about that, because when we talk about core instruction or tier 1, what works in one district for tier 1 and is very successful is not necessarily what the students need at tier 1 in another district, right? There are lots and lots of implications that go into that. If you think back to what Laurie was sharing, it talks about instructional minutes. We talk about resources we have, teacher knowledge, right? All the things that go into producing a tier 1 make it so that it has to vary by district. That's why there's kind of no magic bullet for that. So just very quickly to kind of go through this, if we find that your median student falls into quintile 1, you really need to be thinking about the fact that you have to have an evidence-based targeted intervention as part of core instruction. If your median student in 7th grade cannot read proficiently, then that has to become part of what happens in ELA, right? We have to do that. We have to do that for all students. However, if your median student falls, I don't know how to do the highlight thing. Is it this thing? There it is, I found it. Okay, oh, a new toy. In quintile 4, right, if your median student falls there, we want to make sure that the rigor is high enough for these students, because as we saw on the chart, achievement isn't the only story. Getting them over the proficiency line, if they're still losing ground, is not what we want to be doing. We have to at least maintain. So it looks very different in core instruction depending on where your median student fits. So let's talk about how you find that median student, and then we'll look at that kind of again. So when we look at the diagnostic data to find the median, Jen shared with you that you get a student count, right, as part of this little chart. So this is 5th grade ELA, and if we come down here, we get the student count going across the bottom. You also get a handy dandy cheater's guide here of percentiles, percentage of students. So to reach the median, I need to find the student at the 50th, right? And so I just keep going across the bottom and adding until I say, okay, 20 plus 22, okay, so I'm going to be at 43 there. I'm not at 50 yet, so my median student fell into average, right? Quintile 3. So that helps me just think through, where is that median student? So if we take a look here, again, student count, you can do it that way. You can add it up, find the median student, and find where they fall. You can do that, or you can use the percentage of students to help you kind of indicate. But in this case, the median student falls into quintile 3. So what are the instructional implications of that? We would want to consider spending a few minutes a day, potentially, on class-wide intervention practices to solidify student skills, and then allow them time to move further into the instructional range and into the mastery range, right? So we don't want to just like sit there, but we're not going to overhaul our entire curriculum, because we know that it's working, right? We have our average student, or our median student is average by the state, right, within Pennsylvania. So what we're doing is working. We just want to think about solidifying those skills and making sure students are continuing to hold at least to the growth standard, if not to accelerate past that. But here's another example. Let's take a look at this one. This one's pretty easy to indicate where the median student falls, because when I look at quintile 1, 57% of students fall there, right? So we know right away that the median student is in quintile 1. The instructional implications of that within your MTSS framework are significantly different than if they fall into, and the median student falls into quintile 3. So in this case, we would say you need to consider infusing an evidence-based targeted intervention as part of core instruction. We talk about this so often within the MTSS framework because students don't move quintiles quickly without a Herculean effort, is what we often say, right? So you are not just accidentally going to move students from quintile 1 to quintile 3 or quintile 4 or even to quintile 2. It takes very targeted and well thought out processes to do that. It takes instructional minutes, it takes support, it takes a big change in what you're doing. And so that becomes part of the conversation when you are thinking about it from the MTSS lens. If my median student falls into quintile 1, it means that really in this case, all but 7, let's see here, I can't do the math on those two together, but approximately 90% of the students in this grade level in this content area need an intervention. You're not able to service 90% of your students in tiers 2 and 3. No one's able to do that, right? It has to become a core conversation. Oops, here we go. All right, let's take a look at this one. I left the answer up there for you, but you can see this is another example that we see, right? If we're looking across the bottom, 9%, 22.7%, and so we don't reach the median student until quintile 4. So overall, right, our students are above average in Pennsylvania, so the instructional implications for that are different as well. Take a look here. Again, just sharing this table out with you. This is by no means comprehensive, but it helps you to think about how to start the conversation. And again, I'm going to put in a plug for have that conversation with people who do this work all the time, like our MTSS folks at Patton and the IU. So let's go ahead, partner up with somebody for just a moment, and let's talk about, in our example below, 7th grade ELA, help your partner find the median student here. We'll give you just a minute to do that to make sure you feel solid in this skill. Able to find, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down if you were able to find the median student. Thumbs up or thumbs down? I have good wait time. I was a middle school teacher. Were you able to find the median student in this example? Yeah? Okay, great. Excellent. I'm going to hand it back over to Laurie to give us just a little bit more information and then looking at that through the tiered supports.
Thanks, Laura. All right, so when we're talking about the diagnostic report and the levels of achievement of the students, that's the default view of the diagnostic. Instead of going to the slides for this next section, well, actually, I can go to this slide. What I'm going to do a demonstration now is in PVAAS past, the only view that you had for diagnostic was of achievement levels. But PVAAS current, now you're able to really customize that view to all sorts of student groups that can help you answer all sorts of questions. So instead of going with slides, I'm just going to go back out to the demo site to demonstrate the diagnostic. So for those of you who are already in the demo site or already in your site, you can play along and work with some of the filters with me. Okay. So now, diagnostic data. We were looking at value-added data to see how all students were responding to the programming. In the diagnostic data that Laura shared, we were looking at how different levels of achievers were growing. Do we see any differences there? And I'm going to go to diagnostics for this. But with our diagnostic reports now, we can ask all types of questions just by playing around with the filters. So this is really fun if you get into the data. So if you're in the demo site or if you're in your own site, let me show you how to navigate around some of this. I'm going to go in district reporting though, just so I have a larger student group. In diagnostics, we're going to be able to parse out all sorts of data. It's important to remember that in this report, you need to have 5 students in a group to show a growth color. So if you're working to evaluate a small program, like it's a pull-out intervention program that 5 kids had, You might not have enough students in order to pull a growth color in PVAAS, but you need 5 students to show a growth color for a group. Okay, so now this is that data table that we were looking at for finding the median student. This is just state achievement groups. Raise your hand if you're elementary in the room, and then raise your hand if you're secondary. Okay. Even split. Okay, so I'll keep it on a secondary example right now. So you can see that my base test and subject is Keystone Algebra 1. If you're not interested in Algebra 1, you can use the drop-down menu on the left-hand side to change amongst grade levels and subjects. But for our purposes, I'm going to stick with Keystone Algebra 1. But that's exactly how you use this filter panel in the diagnostic report. So here are measurement options for our conversation today. I'm going to keep it at growth. But no, there's other ways to measure your system. But for right now, I'm just keeping it at growth. But what I want us to pay attention to is how we group students, student grouping options. It defaults to state achievement groups. So how many of your students profile as the highest achievers in the state? That's the number, and then that's the growth. But here's some other options. Say you're working in a system and the bulk of your students fall into the 4s and 5s. It might not be very helpful for you to see a whole bunch of 1s and 2s and 1, 2, and 3, and then have all your students clumped into 4 and 5. Or reverse it. You're working a system where the bulk of your students are in 1s and 2s. Not super helpful to know that you don't have a lot of kids in 5. You probably knew that from lots of other data sources. So if you don't want to group it looking across the state, you can group it looking across your system. So do you see what I've done now? Instead of looping my students into their statewide achievement group, now I'm only looking at my students in my school. Who are my highest achievers? We'll put those in the 5. Who are my lowest achievers? We'll put that in the 5. So it's changed your relative perspective from a statewide distribution to just your school distribution. And that's very helpful if you have kids clustered at either end, either the 1s and the 2s or the 4s and the 5s. So this is one way you can see now how are my highest achievers growing, whoever they might be. They still, if you're in a system that have a whole lot of 1s and 2s, your highest achievers might not be proficient, but you would still be able to see how are my highest achievers growing. So that's one way to look at the data a little bit differently using this student grouping option. But notice you can also look at the data by various demographics. So this is very helpful in problem solving. As you're working with your data teams, somebody has an idea for improvement. So someone might say something like, oh, okay, Keystone Algebra 1, our growth isn't looking that great. I think that it's the boys. The boys aren't paying attention in math class, and we should have an after-school gentlemen's club. That's what I want to do. You could be like, oh, okay, I wonder if we have any data to support that. And then you can sort the data now a little bit differently. So you can test some assumptions or test your hypothesis. So here you'll see that we have now grouped our students by gender. So our females are maintaining their achievement. Our males are slipping. So, I don't know, there could be something to that in this data set. Like maybe you do want to investigate what we can do for boys a little bit differently than girls because there is a difference there. But what if someone doesn't say about boys and girls, but they say, you know what would really help us out is if we made improvements to our IEP programming. So you'd be like, all right, let's check. So instead of using gender, now I'm going to use IEP. And what it does is it takes the students who, yes, have an IEP, and it puts them in the yes column, and it gives you a growth color for the students who, yes, have an IEP. Here, it takes the students with no IEP, puts them in the no column, and now it gives you a growth color for no IEP. So if that was the idea, somebody wants to improve special education because they want the kids with IEPs to grow more, that would probably help students with IEPs. It wouldn't solve the whole issue, right? Because you're also seeing yellow for the no IEP group, but it gives you a piece of data to act on so that you're not trying everything, so that the choices that you're making are data informed. And that's what we mean about like using data to inform decisions. As you're working with your teams to solve problems, people are going to have some great ideas, and you're going to want to test those ideas to see if what you're doing is going to have the impact you expect. So in the diagnostic report, it's super easy to flip between lots of different demographics. Let's look at English learners here. And this is a case where students who are English learners have a much different growth measure than students who are not English learners. So this is a way to test your programming as well. So if you have specific programming for English learners, IEP, Title I, this is one way to yield data on that. But sometimes you don't have a predefined demographic group. Like you might have the kids who went to summer school, right? That's not a demographic. But you have the kids who went to summer school. You can make your own group by clicking on this selected students. It's not working on my demo account. I don't know why it's not working. But if you go to a school one maybe, if you click on selected students, let me see if I get a, all right, I'll try the badminton school. And yeah, here it is. Now, if I have like, I wonder if the students who went to summer school showed any growth. You would click on that and then just pick the students off. On your accounts, you'll see student names. This is just a demo account. So you just click off the students who went to summer school, press enter, and then it'll give you a growth color for students who went to summer school. Kids who are involved in orchestra, those who play football, those who had some targeted intervention program that maybe you pulled them out. So whatever it is that you tried, you can use this report and selecting students to see if you can pull a growth measure on them. It's another piece of data to help inform if your programming is meeting the needs of your students. Yes?
When you are creating these like newer like groupings,
Mm-hmm.
you're saying like looking at different types of groups, is that something that you can save then in the system to refer back to, or each time you want to look at that group, you have to go to individuals and click each one?
The second one. Yes. So,
Like if we're looking at,
yeah.
say, in behaviors, if we're looking at, that tier 2, tier 3 students behaviorally, we want to pair behavioral interventions with track academic success and outcomes. If that was
Perfect. You're exactly right in that it doesn't have the capability to save those reports, but you can definitely track it like that and compare different things. Remember, you can kind of move two pieces at once on this report. You can group students by statewide achievement group up here, but then limit your selection to only the students who participated in a behavioral situation. So like you can mess around with the filters to try to really hone in on a particular population, but it doesn't save it. The best that I can offer is capturing a screenshot, or we also have that print. If you print and then save as a PDF, you'll get an image of the report, but it's not savable.
One thing I would, if you don't mind me adding to that, though, it was the second piece that you said about, well, then I want to think about where they're going in the future. If you know who those students are, there is what's called a custom student report that for like this year, you could look at their projections. I know in this session we didn't talk about that. Remember I said about the windshield, like data to say, how are they what's their probability to perform at a certain level in the future? I want to track these students. You can save that report. So you could create a custom student report of these students in this intervention. Let me save their probabilities, and I could keep referring to that over time. So looks like we have other questions.
Yeah.
If you're creating a custom group like that, is it still you have to have at least 5 kids?
Yes, and I shouldn't have gone off that. And it's 5 kids in 2 different ways. So you have to have 5 kids who group together in a group. So if you only have 5 total kids, unless they group together in the exact same group, then you might not see a growth measure. So there's some ways to mess around with that. Like, for example, if I'm looking at achievement groups and I want to group it like that, I can change it from 5 to 3. So instead of grouping my students across so many groups, I might be able to limit it like that. Or if I want only 2 groups, I might take it off of achievement group and put it on something with fewer options.
Yes.
And you're going to run the report. If you're in algebra, yes, this would cross grade levels because algebra is not a grade level thing. But if otherwise, I have to pick a grade level. So I would have to choose 7th grade ELA. And then one of my student grouping options is GIEP. So I would be able to pull off GIEP in the grouping options. Let's see. But in my data set, I have 0 students with GIEP. So it would show as that dash all the way up until you hit the number 5. And then once you hit the number 5, then it would show a growth color. All right, we have only 2 minutes left. So if you have access to this slide deck within your within the website, there are a whole bunch of resource slides that are available for you. We had talked about the components of a system. Here are digging deeper guides that really break down those components of a core instructional system: curriculum, instruction, assessment, organization. Great resources as you're working to problem solve. We do have a website email contacts for your Pat and MTSS leads. Here is our PVAAS website, but what I'm trying to get to quickly is our email address, the statewide team that gets you to me or Jen. And then we're always looking to improve the PVAAS product and also our own presentation skills. So if you're willing to take a few minutes to respond to our survey, we would really appreciate the feedback on that. And we thank you for your attention today, and you had great questions, great engagement. Good luck in your future data meetings.